Hi everybody, I'm Loretta Stokes and welcome to Facebook Live. We're here at Eventbrite in Nashville and we have a wonderful Eventbrite panel. I'll share with you our esteemed guests here in a minute and introduce yourselves. Our topic today is how to get effective feedback. So I'll start with you, Erin. Would you give us a brief introduction?
Yes, so I'm Erin Tomlinson. I'm the site general manager here at Eventbrite. I've had about an 18-year career in tech, mostly in sales and sales operations. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Bryan, would you go ahead and give us an introduction?
All right, I'm Bryan Mays. I'm the head of engineering for Nashville's software engineering team. Been working in software engineering for, what has it been, like 16, 17 years now. Been with Eventbrite for about 4. And seen the team here from the beginning. So it's been quite a ride, really exciting, and glad to be here today.
All right, great. So getting feedback effectively is very important in developing your career. Very often, people may not get something very specific. So I'll start off with our first question. So why is feedback important?
Okay, I'll take that one. I have a couple notes down. I guess I'd say it's a way for us to communicate. I think communication is really important in kind of everything that we do. And feedback is the way for us to communicate with one another, especially as managers, to communicate with the people that we have on our teams. It helps us improve. And I'd say it's really important too to keep feedback in a tight loop so that we're not kind of surprising people over time. The feedback that's immediate allows us to kind of course correct much better. And if we're waiting to do the feedback, that's going to kind of kill us because all of a sudden it's like things that were in the past and you can't really correct those as well as you can things that just happen.
Yeah. I think without feedback, it's kind of like the definition of insanity, where you keep doing the same things but expect different results. And so, you have to proactively get feedback to know where those areas of opportunities are to improve. Otherwise, you'll just keep going along and doing what you've been doing, which, there's always more effective ways of doing things if we're continuously learning.
Definitely. So leading into the next question, what's the biggest lesson that you have learned from feedback?
One of my favorites, when I first became a new leader, I think sometimes when you're a new leader, you think, oh, I'm the boss, so everybody should just do what I tell them to do. And you learn really quickly it doesn't work that way. And so I had a mentor once who taught me about the emotional bank account and how important that is in working with people. And the emotional bank account is kind of like a financial bank account, but based on trust. So you're putting deposits in or making withdrawals out. And so I think feedback is a great way to build that trust level with your team or your peers or cross-functional partners, and really getting to know the individuals, understanding the individuals, paying attention to the little things that motivate them, and just being proactive about ways of recognizing people if things are going well, or if things aren't, that you're addressing them like Bryan said, real time and with very specific examples, so that you know what to do actually and how to fix it.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you. I think that capital thing is kind of a important piece to think about through life. There's emotional capital, kind of like the people we work with. There's a tolerance to us kind of bothering them and asking for them for things that we need to do, and feedback. I think you got to kind of be thinking about how you're exchanging tough feedback with people and what their capacity is for taking that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to make too many withdrawals, which is constructive feedback as much as we think it's all positive. To the person receiving it, it's an emotional withdrawal. So how are you putting things back in, from a positive perspective, so that that feedback is ultimately received, right?
I think another really important thing to think about with feedback is you're talking about constructive feedback. Sometimes we have top performers too that we need to be really thoughtful about thinking of things that we can do to, not correct their feedback in that case, because it's not so much a correction, but thinking about things that we can do to help them be even better than they are. So constructive feedback isn't always like corrections on things that are going wrong, but it's how you even do better than you are right now sometimes as well.
Something that my team does is we do the Strengths Finder. I think this feeds into what you're saying. Strengths Finder is a book that you can get, and it gives you an assessment on what are your top 5 strengths. And we try to think about those strengths when, especially with top performers. So how can we take what you're good at and make it even better, and anchoring it back to like very specific competencies.
All right, going to answer our next question. So how do you apply some of that knowledge today in receiving those types of feedback?
I think, for me with feedback, you have to give it very regularly, right? You have to ask for it very regularly. And so sometimes a company will create avenues for feedback, like a performance review or something more formal like that. But a lot of times it's not at the level of frequency that we would want. Sometimes you just get one performance review a year. So what are other ways to go and get feedback throughout the year? Things that we do is we look at quarterly doing some kind of what we call start, stop, continue, where we may pull the whole team together and get feedback on what are things we should start doing, stop doing, or continue doing, and then build actual plans around that feedback. Also trying to get feedback from different levels, right? You may get a lot of feedback from your boss, but you may not get a lot from your peers, or if you're a manager, from your direct reports. So how can you create opportunities for feedback from all different levels, or folks that you interact with on a regular basis versus just your manager?
Yeah, 360 feedback I think is really important, not just for people in a leadership role, but for individuals on the team too. Understanding peer review as well as kind of if they're truly looking to do kind of a better job and not just like how do I get promoted, like if they want to holistically improve, that peer review stuff is really important too. Understanding and self-actualization, is that the right kind of way to talk about it? Like, I think that's one thing that as I'm looking for people when we're hiring and stuff too, that's a little maybe outside topic, but like how do people think about themselves and what's their view of themselves as it relates to the world? Not just game to try and like gain a promotion, but how are they trying to improve overall, and how are they really trying to like think about how they're doing within their job and in the world?
I think another thing that I've found to be really beneficial is creating a network outside of your company. Whether it's going to regular meetups or just keeping in touch with people from your past, having regular, whether it's lunches or coffees, and having an avenue to maybe even just vent your frustrations and get feedback from an external source, or, are the problems that I'm having normal problems that other people have outside of this environment? Sometimes it helps to just have that type of connection and to know you're not alone usually in how you're feeling about things, and it's not always company specific or job specific, and that there's general best practices out there for how to get better or how to deal with challenges. So
I really like that one. I think that's a good one to remember.
So what other tips? So if you're getting that type of feedback, then what do you do with that feedback now that you're getting it from all these sources? How do you respond?
I know what I try to do is actually have kind of a documented development plan. So, what are the things that I have strengths in now? How can I continue to leverage those things? Where are areas of opportunity? And then actually, what are the actions I want to take to develop those things? And I learned a model once at a former job in terms of actions, trying to have think of it as 70-20-10. So 70% of your actions should be on the job. Like you have a focus on something, but it's just in the normal, work that you're doing that you're focusing on it. And then 20% may be, formal training, like, read a book or go to a class or something like that. And then 10% maybe mentoring, working with another person. So when you're building out a plan, trying to make sure that the majority of the actions are actually just things you're doing in the normal course of your work, but with just maybe an extra focus on it. Because I think sometimes we always go to I got to read a book, or I got to go to a class, or I need a mentor. But you should do those, but they should be supplementary to the actual like on-the-job development.
It's interesting. Like I've never thought about it that way, but I use Trello to kind of track like my to-do list, if you will. But in terms of some of my to-dos, they're around development and improvement, and I have kind of like 3 tracks within Trello. One of them's like near term, kind of medium term, and long term. And I take some of the long term ones and I'll move them over to midterm, and then I translate the midterm ones into like real time tasks. Just kind of, I think, kind of the way you're talking about the 70.
You just have a much more like structured engineering way of doing it.
Yeah.
Which is really awesome.
I don't know.
Yeah, I like the Trello board. Those are pretty good if you can use those. So, Amanda, do we have any Facebook Live questions?
Yeah, so a question from Dominique. How can a person decipher effective feedback from ineffective feedback?
That's good.
That's a good question. I think, that's why it's important to get feedback from a lot of different places, because one person may have one opinion, and it may be a good piece of feedback to have, but if literally no one else feels that way, then it's probably not relevant, right? So, but if the same thing keeps popping up every time, then that's probably something you need to work on,
Well, and it depends. I mean, the source too, like where I was talking about kind of holistically being better, but you also have to think about like if your leader is asking you to do something, you kind of need to prioritize feedback in some ways.
Yeah.
And so I think, feedback can be two-way. I think that's a really important piece of feedback too. And so if you're getting what you think maybe is like not the best feedback from someone that's in a position of kind of, authority to you or whatever, I think there is a back and forth that can be constructive. So that network, kind of understanding kind of like other people like externally. And I think, you have a good sense of what's right too sometimes. And I think there's a constructive way you can manage up or feedback the other direction too. In the case where, I don't know what popped to mind right away for me when that question was asked was like, how, if there's someone that's kind of like, feeding back to me in a way that I don't think is as constructive, how do I like mold that to make it something so that it's constructive for everyone?
Yeah, try to lead with what are the actual specific actions I can take to address the feedback. If it's not rooted in anything specific, I think that's where it's kind of ineffective. Like, what do you do with it? Like, how do I improve that? What are the actions? And then actually like co-creating those actions with the person giving feedback helps a lot as well.
In sales, do you guys do the OKR stuff?
It's a little easier in sales because we have quotas.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't hit your quota, there's usually a problem.
Okay.
But I think what we really try to hone in on is more of the how are we doing things, and that's where a lot of the feedback comes into play. And how you're positioning the product, how you're overcoming objections, whatever, and really developing on those skills.
Yeah, I think for engineering, we started to do OKRs pretty regularly. And I think one thing about
What's
that
OKR?
Yeah, they may not know that.
objectives and key results, it's Google has done a lot of research around it. And I think one thing for me, I tend to communicate a lot in kind of like general, and it's helped me be very specific about the things. And like we were talking about, feedback is sometimes not as effective or not as good. It could be because it's too broad, and it helps to kind of hone in on specific examples of the things that you need to do to reach an objective.
Yeah, so probably people have heard of the term SMART goals, but really aligning, whatever actions you intend to take based on feedback to that SMART format. And then that gets you down to that specific level with some kind of measurement or, due date on it. And you stick to it better, I think, when it's that specific.
And we have one other one. What are some of the right questions to ask to make sure that you are getting actionable feedback? Do you have like recommendations for a format question?
I just really love that start, stop, continue format. I just learned recently you should actually do it in continue, start, stop instead of start, stop, continue. Because sometimes we forget to do the continue, and that's usually where things are going really, really well. But just formatting feedback in that way gets a lot of things out on the table. So that's really the format I like to use.
Can you ask the question one more time so I can kind of?
Oh yeah, sorry. What are some of the right questions to ask in order to make sure you're getting actionable feedback?
Okay. I'd probably go with what you said. I mean, you covered it pretty much.
I think another thing too is like if there are certain things that you want to work on. So say I really want to work on executive level presentations. Coming in with a very specific thing that you want feedback on. How am I doing on these? Where are areas of opportunity specifically in this competency? And creating a little bit more specificity for the feedback in the first place.
Yeah, refining, kind of drilling down to understand what it is specifically. I think that's a good way to talk about it.
All right, well, thank you for being on our panel today. It's been great to bring some of my Eventbrite, fellow Brightlings together. So I appreciate your time. Thanks again. I know everybody appreciates hearing a little bit more about your background and how to get effective feedback. So as we're wrapping up, I want you to remember what our next event, it will be May 17th. You will sign up using the Eventbrite application, I'll add. And we'll send out more details as it comes, and this will be the live event here in Nashville. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.